they say.
So to speak, right. I got it.
Right, right. Well, once
Oh,
again, everyone, thank you very much for coming on to the Pangean. I am Alex Madajian, and once again, I am graced by the presence of Dr. Michael Gendre. Now, we've had a lovely conversation about Immanuel Kant and then Hegel, and now I kind of want to bring it all together into sort of the fallout, you could say, of both of them, and talk about academia. Now, you're a professor in Massachusetts, and I know you've done lots of work in public education, and you have lots to say on academia. Would you say that if somebody decides to go to grad school or pursue a career in academia, what do you think they should be aware of? What do you think they should know that is not talked about?
okay. So you're, I think, Alex, talking about somebody interested in the humanities. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
yeah, specifically the humanities.
Right. So what I would say, I would like to bring out the example of some very famous people from different centuries, especially Elizabeth I. Elizabeth I, by the age of 11 or 12, wrote to her father, Henry VIII, uh, a little booklet, and she could write it in Latin, in French, and in Italian. Okay, age 11, she spoke those three languages. Now, the Latin obviously was needed because the Bible was in Latin at the time. The James Bible came after her reign. So that's quite a few years after she was a very young woman. So the important thing, the point I'm making is languages actually open up your mind in a very significant way. Now, I was privileged in a way that I started, I grew up in Morocco, I spoke French, and I had all these languages surrounding me. And so I paid close attention to the languages. Plus, I took Latin and Greek in high school. No, in school. After the sixth grade, I started. So I honestly believe that that's important. There is a letter also of Thomas Jefferson to his nephew, Peter Carr, C-A-R-R. You can look it up. And Peter Carr was interested in learning Italian because the language sounds very beautiful, more beautiful than probably Spanish or even French. But he spoke French most likely, like they all did, just like Elizabeth. They all spoke French. So they spoke French, they took Latin, and then the question was Peter going to learn Italian on top of Spanish? Now, Jefferson believed that he had to learn Spanish because in the Americas you have to learn Spanish. My point is this. The mind of any educated person will actually broaden if they have access to these other languages, because you start thinking from the perspective of another individual and a bunch of other individuals. Now, in my case, I had to pick up German too, by the way, because of philosophy. At first, I hesitated. I mean, I was reluctant. It's not that I hesitated. I was reluctant. But then eventually I had to, and I'm sort of proficient level 2 in German. But I find it fascinating to learn these languages because honestly, you start thinking differently if you know enough of these languages. So the first thing I would say is learn a foreign language. And it can be done fairly quickly now, right?
Sure.
That's the first piece of advice. The second piece of advice is learn history. History is very badly taught by the average system of education.
How would you say it is taught, and how should it be taught?
Well, personally, I think it has the vast majority. It all depends on the teacher you have. Okay, that's something very much the case. So depending on the teacher you have, that obviously makes a huge difference. But I think the internet is also a key teacher. For example, in the book that our book that you've mentioned, there's a
Right. Aligning values in politics.
right.
And
The subtitle is empowerment versus
empowerment versus entitlement. Yes.
right. Now there is one chapter on imperialism, and it took me honestly a lot of work and effort to figure out how I needed to approach the concept of imperialism. Now, I think I did a more than okay job, but it's not complete even in this chapter. The reason why I had to struggle with this chapter in particular was the fact that I had to actually go to the roots of imperialism, the idea of an empire, as sort of make as being part of the Western tradition. And then, of course, I had to go to the first one who built an empire and was imitated by subsequent empire builders. And the first one is Alexander of Macedon. Now, Alexander of Macedon was, it turns out, a student of the best known student of Aristotle. But he was clearly someone with, either you would call him a sociopath or a psychopath. No, really.
Either way, he was really good at what he did. And that was to conquer the world. He was really good at that.
But how did he get started? Age 19, he, with his mother, killed his father, and then proceeded to exterminate all kinds of people ruthlessly.
I love how I ask you how is history taught, and then you proceed to explain to me that Alexander the Great was a sociopath. I love how we got there.
I mean, in the case of so Caesar also. I mean, read Julius Caesar by Shakespeare. I mean, he comes across as somebody who was sociopathic. And Napoleon probably was not, but still, borderline. And the other ones, the bad ones, Hitler and Stalin, clearly were. And talk of Mao Zedong and talk of the Cambodian horrible individuals who slaughtered millions of people. Yeah. I mean, these people are really sociopaths or psychopaths, and so I think it has to be explained that the real bad things in history come out of such individuals, right? And so then, by contrast, what are the forces either of societies that opposed the Roman Empire and essentially caused it to collapse? What is it in Western civilization that managed to go beyond that? And I think it is the advent of capitalism and the advent of discoveries and the advent of America and what it is that America has achieved and could achieve. So, I mean, this is where history has to inculcate values about wealth creation and discoveries and science. That's where I think history has to. So, for example, I would highly recommend one book. It's by Daniel Boorstin. It's called The Discoverers.
Oh, wow! What makes you recommend it?
Well, the fact that in order for us to understand our world, we have to understand that it's a globe, that it needs to facilitate communication between different people, cultures, and they benefit from knowing about each other, for sure. I mean, there was always an attraction from the Western world on the part of the Western world, Greece and Rome and the rest in England, for India. I mean, it turns out that our languages are Indo-European languages, right? So how come this fascination for India? I mean, it has to be explained somehow, and that it actually leads global history in the direction of the East.
Really? Right. So you find the East to be the driver of civilization, not the West?
Well, the West feels a pull toward the East. I mean, if you take even Nietzsche, you take the two post Hegelian thinkers, Schopenhauer and Nietzsche, they both pull themselves away from socialism and the sort of stale ideology of the professors. I mean, they're anti-professor. Yeah, really, they're anti-professorial. These two, and they, in the case of Schopenhauer, he's drawn to the Vedic philosophers of India, and in the case of Nietzsche, he's kind of drawn toward the Zarathustra, who is the foremost thinker of Persia.
Wow. Okay.
There's a pull toward the East there, right there.
So would you say that Western civilization is a ultimate product of the Eastern? Is that would you say ultimately, or at least the West cannot survive without the East? Would you go that far?
Yes, I would go that far. But obviously there are things the West has produced that the East did not produce, which must be credited to the West. Such as
is it also vice versa? Does the East need the philosophies of the West, or?
Well, yes. If you want to have well-being on a great scale, yes, absolutely. Yes, you need the inventions that were made possible because of the electric bulb, or all these things that we that actually were invented in the West, for sure.
Wow.
Not in America only, by the way.
Sure.
Because the computer, the ability to have a computer was made possible in the Silicon Valley of California, but the people who made it possible were not Californians, were not Americans. Turns out, right?
Right. As it turns out, yeah, we're running a little bit less on time, but I very much appreciate you giving more bullets in my gun, because over at the Pangaean, I'm the main one of the main people in the western part of the world. So you're giving me lots of ammo in my gun against all my wonderful colleagues from the east. But we're running out of time here. I very much appreciate you coming on, and thank you for discussing education. That was so one. I love how I asked you a question. I was expecting a fairly straightforward and standard typical answer, but you gave so much more breadth and depth than I was expecting. I deeply appreciate you going beyond talking points and giving me something very, very fascinating to consider. Thank you so much for everyone logging on. I do hope to hear from you very soon. Again, thank you, Dr. Gendre. This is wonderful.
You're very welcome. Thank you, Alex. Thank you.